Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
Fogle got bumped by Henry Thrun, young defenseman who played quite a bit last year for the Sharks. Now the wraparound. Fogle, save is made, score!
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings.
Moves over the line, leaves it for LaFerriere, drops it to Clark, down to the left circle, cuts to his right. Clark throws it in front, he scores! Great job screening the goaltender by Fogle and the Kings.
Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
Joining me today from the fourth period, Kings of the podcast, you know him, you love him, Dennis Bernstein. How are you doing today, Dennis?
Well, they know me. I'm not sure about the love part. Doing great, Jess.
Doing
great.
If they didn't love you, they wouldn't keep harassing you on Twitter, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
When you stop doing that, when you stop calling is when I worry. So
Right.
it's great to be with you.
I have to get it out of the way first. I don't particularly care about baseball, but I'm aware that other people do. So condolences to you on your Yankees being down 0-2 at the time of recording.
Yeah, well, look, if they're going to lose to one team, it's the Dodgers. They're my second favorite team. The family has season tickets. I go to a lot of games, so I'll be happy for a lot of friends, but it's not over yet. We'll see. The key game is tomorrow night, but yeah, took it on the chin. Did go to game one, which was an all-time classic. And, as you mentioned, I'm a Yankee fan. As the ball's going over the fence, as Freddie Freeman hit it, I'm going, I can't be mad. I saw one of the best baseball games of all time, so it was disheartening, but it's great for the city. It's great to see all these people excited, but let's talk some hockey.
Look, selfishly, I'll be glad when the whole thing's over because every time we have a Kings game and I host Kings Talk after the Kings game, there's a Dodgers game on. So I have no idea if anybody's listening because they're watching the Dodgers game.
Of course.
All right, so let's dive into this. We're going to start with the honorable mention. We're talking about the last week of Kings hockey, which is 3 games. The games against the Sharks, the Utah Hockey Club, sorry, and the Vegas Golden Knights. So who is your honorable mention this week?
Honorable mention, anytime a Kings defenseman scores 2 goals in a game, he's going to get on my list. So I'm going to give it to Joel Edmondson for his 2-goal performance against Utah the other day. So I think that's my honorable mention guy right now.
Yeah, I was surprised when he scored 1.
Yes.
I was doubly surprised when he scored 2. It's funny. He's not a guy that I think of as being incapable of scoring goals. When Andreas Englund scores a goal, you go, oh, hey, okay, all right. Andreas Englund got a goal.
Right.
It's not that pronounced when it's Edmondson, but it was surprising that he got 2 in one game. It was
surprising. You would think his defense partner, 92, would get 2 in a game, but it was certainly see. And look, I know he's had a couple of rough games and he's playing with Clark, but I think so far so good with him. But 2 goals for any defenseman on the Kings gets him on my list.
So it's tough to choose a defenseman for this week because the penalty kill has struggled, and obviously there's only so many defensemen, and they're all on the penalty kill. So any defenseman you choose is going to have moments where they looked exposed or they looked bad. I'm going with a different defenseman. I'm going with Jordan Spence.
Okay. Because
he had a goal and an assist, and then I went to Natural Stat Trick just to try and flesh out my reasoning. And I realized that Jordan Spence was only on the ice for 1 goal against in these 3 games at whatever strength, even strength, penalty kill, power play, whatever. And that's, of all the people who played 3 games, that's the lowest. It's tied for the lowest. Spence, LaFerriere, Fogle, Turcotte, Jeannot, Lewis, and Lee were all only on the ice for 1 goal. And of all those guys, he played the most minutes. He had 1 goal. I thought his goal came at an important time of the season for him because and you know this, it's easy to pick on the fringe. I don't mean to say that dismissively, but it's easy to pick on support players.
Yep.
For not
Trevor Lewis.
You sure. So Jordan Spence hadn't scored a lot, and he'd been asked to fill in for Drew Doughty, which is a near impossible task.
Right. Agreed.
And so it was really, and I'm a huge Jordan Spence fan, so it was really nice for me to see him get a goal. So he's my honorable mention this week. So we've got two defensemen leading off. Who's your runner up then?
A guy who broke through in the goal column this week, Warren Fogle, who had been playing good, but just hadn't found the back of the net. Got 2 against San Jose, 1 against Vegas. So it's good to see him get him in the scoring column. Like, he's not a 35 goal scorer, but he needs to contribute. So I think he had a nice week goal scoring wise. So I picked Fogle as my my runner up.
All right. So I'm super confused now because I had Joel Edmondson as my runner up with the 2 goals. The second goal he scored, was it the second goal he scored where he was basically crashing the net and he took
correct. Off a rebound. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if Kopitar intended for the puck to wind up on his stick or if Kopitar was just moving it to open space.
Right.
But either way, he accepts the puck from the front of the net and bangs it home. And listen, the team brought in all these players to be physical and to increase the physicality, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think it has had a ripple effect on other players, but I think the players brought in to be physical have been physical, and Joel Edmondson certainly has been physical.
Yes.
Not, there may be some areas, listen, there's always going to be plays where you go, well, this guy could have done more, that guy could have done more. So, he hasn't been perfect, but 2 goals, for a player that you're not really expecting offense from, he is my runner-up. So I'm very curious to know then who your king of the week is.
The team is 22nd in power play, 25th in penalty kill, and they are on track for right now. I know, small sample size, 109-point season.
Okay,
my king of the week is not a player.
Okay,
it's a coach.
All right.
Like, this team has, like, you go down the list of guys who haven't produced so far. Andrew's out hurt, and the goalie got hurt the second game. The fact that they're 5-2-2, I'll give it to Jim Hill because somehow he's finding ways to win games. Like, he's put enough work in with this team. The fact that they're not producing offensively, they're not great on the penalty kill, as you mentioned. They've been really mid with respect to their play on ice if they've won. I'll credit the coach for those wins and I get it. Some of those games you got to win. You got to beat San Jose. Utah's a decent team. They haven't beat and they didn't look good against Vegas. But the fact that they're 5-2-2, when a lot of people were naysaying this team before the start of the season opening night, well, they're going to get destroyed in Buffalo. They wound up winning there. They found ways to win. And, with the schedule coming up, they go to San Jose again. They could find a way to beat Vegas. And then they got Chicago at home. Like, there's winnable games here. So it's a nice start. And I'll credit the coach for making a million line combination changes and tinkering around with the defense. And I get it. Akil Thomas hasn't playing, and that's a really hot spot for some fans. But I'll give it to the coach because, again, I think what they've done on ice belies what their record is.
They are 5-2-2. By the time, the next game finishes, they could be 6-2-2.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because all the things you said, I've listened to a bunch of fan podcasts. I've talked to a bunch of fans. I've had conversations with media members and franchise employees, and I've never experienced, I can't remember how many times the team's been 5-2-2 to start a season. But given that the record is 5-2-2, everybody seems very concerned about the 5-2-2. Which is unusual, okay. I think.
I think it's unusual because are you telling me that Quentin Byfield is going to score 10 goals this year? Or Trevor Moore?
I don't know, but I listened
to guys not producing and they're winning.
But when they were, it wasn't 5-2-2, it might have been 3-2-2. I listened to an episode of Kings of the Podcast with you and Hoven, and both of you were not, talking about the team as if it was a world beater.
It's not a world beater, but the fact that they've won the games, you got to give somebody credit for that.
No, for sure. But I'm just saying it's weird to have everybody knows what the record is.
Yeah.
But everybody also knows what needs to be improved. And nobody is shy about talking about it. And that's the weird thing. Like, the only place I've seen online where the fans are, not just perfectly happy, but bullish based on the record is the Discord server. And, that's a whole other conversation. Shout out to the Discord server. But
Well, but you're 5-2-2, and Byfield and Dano have not scored a goal.
no, and listen, Jim Hiller referenced it himself, right? He said, "Is it a good thing that we're 5-2-2 and not playing well, or is it a bad thing?"
I kept asking him; he was concerned about
I heard you.
And he wasn't that, and we get along fine. He's like, "Oh, really? You're digging in on me?" I'm like, "Yeah, because there's areas of concern. There certainly are. But when you win the games that you're supposed to win, so you don't have to sweat in March or April." Fine. I mean, again, it's going to be coming down to what are the 35 games the record going to be without Drew. But for right now, he's pulling the right levers. They're doing enough to win. Like, here's the thing. You watch Vegas play San Jose yesterday. They got up 3-0, blew them out. This team, they won 3-2. My concern is that they haven't separated from teams that they should have in the third period. The third periods haven't been great the last 3 games. When you look at them, right? Not good. Ran out of gas in Vegas. Not good against San Jose, and they didn't close out Utah. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I get those concerns, and it should be. Like I get the take that some people are going to say this is a mirage, right? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But there's so many guys not doing enough that are going to progress and not regress. Like Dano and Byfield can't regress anymore scoring wise. Like they're going to get their points, and like I said, Moore's going to score some goals. So again. I think that, yes, you could say cliche-wise they're winning in spite of themselves, but, man, they're still winning games, and he said it best. He was not going to be apologetic for winning games.
No,
apologetic. Go ahead.
Well, I don't think they should be, and I thought his answer, the final answer he gave to you where he said, I'm not going to overthink wins.
Yeah, right.
Fair. I think the issue for me is that going into the season, I've said this a dozen times in various places, there were so many question marks. Zach and I said the only thing that isn't a question mark at this point is that Anderson and Doughty will be a dynamite top pair. And then Doughty gets hurt, and you're like, okay, well, great. No, so now everything's a question. And so even though they are 5-2-2, do you remember, was it a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago that the Ducks were in first place in December?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And everyone was like, okay, the Ducks. And I was like, and then it just fell apart.
They fell out of the sky. They were
so I think people don't want that.
Yeah,
probably,
probably
not.
Right? They're not getting destroyed on puck position. And not for nothing, expected goals against the top 3 in the league, at 5-on-5. So the 5-on-5 play is still solid. They're not giving up on that. And I get maybe there's a quality of competition you have to talk about on who they've played, but they still have played good defense. Like the goaltending's been really good. Except for Ottawa, the goaltending's kind of been good enough. Can't blame them. You put Rich in there too many times in a row, which analytically you wouldn't do.
No, my takeaway from the I keep wanting to call him the Kraken. My takeaway from the hockey club game, the Utah game, was a solid performance out of Darcy Kemper.
Yeah.
It didn't reinvent the wheel. It didn't make me, think of peak Jonathan Quick or anything. But for a guy who came back from whatever his injury was that caused him to be on IR, stepped in, did what he had to do. They picked up 2 points.
Yeah, they've been good enough defensively. And so, again, I think then the offense finally wakes up. And let's be real here, Jess. I mentioned the penalty kill and the power play. The power play looks as bad as it's looked in a very long time. And I know they got one yesterday, but it hasn't looked good. It's like this perimeter stuff, against Vegas, it was atrocious. So I don't know how you change that. They would think simple scheme would change, get somebody to the net. And I keep going back to the fact that you go back to the Vegas game and you see what Stone and Hurdle did at the net. They need to do that. And I know they don't have guys necessarily like that, but the mentality has to change and mindset. And Jim talked about that early in the season about mindset, about playing defense. Mindset's got to be better offensively. And I get it. They're still fooling around with lines. And I get it. Fiala's been an issue, now. And I give him credit for that, John, because, John, I give him that Jesse.
I was about to say that's all right. No, they both start with J. It's okay.
Yeah, I credit him for saying he's going to keep players accountable, and he made them accountable. The fact that Kevin Fiala didn't play the last 25 minutes of that game yesterday afternoon, says something. It says something. Some coaches threaten that, and he followed through. And I get why. I get it. And I like that player. I think you need. And people keep going back now to the trade. They shouldn't have traded. I get it. Brock Faber's a really good player. He's going to be good. But if this team didn't have this guy as an offensive threat, it would be really, really tough for them to score. And I get all the mistakes he made, but I'm glad to see that you spoke about accountability and you made it happen.
Well, I'll be very curious to see when Drew Doughty comes back and what that does to the season. But my king of the week is
Please.
Warren Fogle with 3
Beautiful.
goals. And he was one of the players where, you could write down a list for me, bullet point by bullet point, about what makes Warren Fogle a good player. And I would simply look at his career to this point and say last year was his best year.
Mm-hmm.
And, I understand that it wasn't all the result of playing alongside Leon Draisaitl, but
Sure.
some of it was.
Of course. 100%.
And playing on that, offensively charged Oilers team. And so he was one of the bigger question marks because he wasn't like Jeannot, Edmondson, Burrows, right? He's not a face puncher.
Primetime player. Yeah.
Right. He comes in, he's a support player. Where's he going to play? Who's he going to play with? Right off the hop, it was going to be Byfield, Fiala, and Fogle. And in that case, he's obviously the third fiddle on that line, if that line had stayed together, but it didn't.
Right.
So now he's with Turcotte and Laferriere, who I believe have been the two most entertaining players so far, if not the best.
Been their best line. If you had a line of the week, it would be that line for sure.
100%. And so for him to get one, and the first one he got was, again, it wasn't lucky, but it was fortunate.
Yeah.
So then for him to come back and get 2 more and continue to play well and continue to find a role, that's kind of what my takeaway was. At the Vegas game that line debuted? I don't remember. But anyway, whatever game it was, I said, like, if the takeaway from this is that now we have that line, Turcotte, Laferriere, and Fogle, that's a huge bonus because, as you were saying, in our previous conversation, you have to imagine that Byfield and Deneau and Fiala and Moore will start putting up more points than they have. And so if you actually have a third line to complement those other 2 lines, you can worry about the fourth line later.
Yeah. Well, it can't be the best line every week.
No,
right?
No, listen, absolutely.
But the guys got to come through. But the fact that you have, like, if that line keeps clicking, then legitimately you'll have 3 legitimate lines who can put the puck in the back of the net, something they haven't had in a very long time. So you hope that, but who knows with Hiller, who flips around everything. So it's going to be interesting to see. But if they can get that line clicking, and
I mean, he doesn't really though. Like, I'm beginning to get a little bit tired of that narrative, if I'm honest.
Which narrative?
Like Hiller, the mad scientist, Hiller, the blender, the coach, the line blender. Like,
well, I agree. And just at some point, there's got to be some continuity. Like, I get it. Like this,
I think it seems pretty clear what the continuity is going to be, though.
Yeah, well, but this, regardless of what happened to Drew Doughty, it was going to take 20 games to get this team like settled in. Because even without Drew being hurt, there were a lot of changes.
Yeah, no, listen, they have 10 new guys in the lineup.
Yeah, at some games, there was a change on every single line combination and pairing from Game 5 last year in Edmonton. Like, and that's not, and you can't even tell me what the legit pairs are right now. Like the 3 pairs, like, what's it going to be? Is Cork going to really be with Edmonton for the whole time? What's going to happen with who's going to pair with Mikey Anderson? Is he going to move Gavrikov over to play 20 minutes on the right side again, like he did in Montreal? I agree with the mad scientist stuff, and I think he's trying to find a way. And when your team is not producing offensively, you have to do that. You're forced that. He's forced on defense because of the injury to Doughty, right? So it's going to be interesting. I don't think the mad scientist did because look, you're not breaking up Kempe. If you break up Kempe, Kopitar, and Moore and Deneau, and that you're really talking mad scientist stuff. But I don't think you're at that point yet. And I think there has to be some continuity, at least with pairs on line combinations.
But when it comes to the blue line, the absence of Doughty has forced chaos, right? Because like I said, 100%. The only stable thing you knew about the team going into this season was, okay, Anderson and Doughty will be a pair. All right, so Doughty's not there anymore. Now you do have to figure out, well, who does Mikey Anderson play with? Is Mikey Anderson your number 1 lefty in a world without Drew Doughty? I don't think anybody knows. What's that?
Good question.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody knows the answer, and it's no disrespect to Mikey Anderson, but Braden McNabb is not a number 1 lefty.
Right.
But the year that Drew Doughty won the Norris Trophy, he absolutely was.
Right. Yeah.
So okay, so the blue line I don't attribute to necessarily Jim Hiller's chaotic hockey mind. I say
it's
that
born out of necessity to an injury.
It's because we have to find the answers.
If Drew Doughty was not hurt, you would not have these combinations.
Correct.
100% yes.
On the forward lines, I don't know if I did predict. I don't know that I predicted it on the show, but I predicted in private conversations that we would see Byfield return to the top line and Fiala return to the Deneau line. And a lot of people accused me of being crazy or pessimistic. And when I implied that it might happen on the show, I was told, no, absolutely not. But there's some things that happen because they have to.
Right. Correct.
And so there's no amount of impulse towards tinkering or the desire to make, you talked about mixing up the forward lines. That was in a game that was a total blowout. Anytime you're losing by 4 goals, yeah, sure. In the third period, the lines might be...
Yeah, Brand Cluck had the highest time on ice in Vegas.
Yeah, but then the next game, you go right back to what works. And what we know works, it's not working at the moment. But what we know works is Byfield, Kopitar, and Kempe, and Fiala, Deneau, and more. And for whatever reason, that Fiala plays with those 2 guys and nobody else.
Yeah. Well, they got a little cover because of the Turcotte line, right?
Hopefully.
They can do that so they can tinker with those 6. But I don't think there's going to be that. Like, you're not going to separate Kempe and Kopitar. You're probably not going to separate Deneau and more. But
I had to laugh in spite of myself because listening to your program with John Hoven.
Yes.
And John is sorry. I don't mean to attack John when he's not here to defend himself, and I'm not attacking.
You can anyway. It's okay.
I mean, listen. He can text me about it if he doesn't like it. Who are we kidding? He's not listening. But the sort of line mixology that he was attempting, when the reality is, it's not going to happen. Like, you can talk yourself into whatever fantasy lines you want, but
yeah, sure,
it's not going to happen. So enjoy yourself. But
Andre Lee's not going to be LW1.
No, spoiler alert, he's not.
Exactly.
So anyway, Dennis Bernstein, congratulations, Warren Fogle, this week's King of the Week. And thank you for joining me, Dennis, and appreciate it as always. And if anybody wants to hear your Yankees sympathizing, where can they find it?
They can find it online, Dennis TFP on X, Twitter, whatever they call it these days. Kings of the Podcast. We do the hot stove every Saturday from I'd say 8 to 10 Pacific, since most of the fans listening will be in LA. This week, because of the games in Finland, we'll be going from 7 a.m. But that's where you can find us.
All right, Dennis Bernstein, thank you so much. We'll see you at practice one of these days.
Oh, yeah. Always great being all the Kings men, Jess. Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Joining me now for a look ahead rather than a look behind, Jack Jablonski. How are you doing today, Jack?
I'm great. It's good to be back.
Before we dive into this, I want to run something by you because I feel like you're the kind of person who will have an opinion about this, and I hope that you'll agree with me, but you may not necessarily.
Is this another one of your just far-fetched?
Sure.
Okay, carry on.
And listen, I've told people there are things that I believe very strongly or not very strongly at all, but then there's also the scale of like, how much do I care about what I believe in? And so this is a take that I 100% believe to be true, but I don't.
You'll
but
take
I don't
this
really care about.
Okay, so you're not taking this to your grave. It's
I don't care. And if people want to tell me I'm an idiot or whatever, like, I don't care.
Okay, so this isn't like one of your overtime spiels or
no. This one, I'm just curious to know what other people think.
The draft.
The draft. I care very strongly about the draft. I believe that when a team relocates, changes its name, changes its colors, changes its jerseys, I don't care that it brings with it a front office staff or a roster. In my mind, it's just a new team.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, the Utah Hockey Club is not the Arizona Coyotes. It's not the Winnipeg Jets from the 80s.
No,
I don't want Dale Hawerchuk's number hanging in the rafters in Utah. I don't want to hear about, Utah Hockey Club legend Shane Doan. Like, no, it's a new club. I know what happened. Because I tweeted about it and people keep tweeting me, well, actually, this is what happened. And there was a deal signed. And I'm like, listen, trust me. I know. I work in this industry. I promise you I've paid closer attention to this than you. No offense. I realize that's arrogant. But believe me, I understand the situation better than you do. The fact that you disagree with me is not a consequence of me not being educated. We just disagree. Avs are not the Nordiques. The Canes are not the Whalers.
It's so interesting because it's like, for me, I also feel like the Nordiques, obviously we hope that they come back. You would assume that's probably the next city, hopefully, to get a franchise. But it's odd because it's like to me, I'm like, yeah, well, they are the Nordiques from Colorado, but then I also, for whatever reason, completely agree that this is not Arizona anymore. Like,
If the
for whatever
Minnesota
reason,
Wild moved
yeah,
to Quebec,
yeah,
and then you got an email that was like, hey, Kirill Kaprizov, or let's say they draft some new kid and he sets
yeah,
a record for most points in franchise history. I don't know who holds the record for most points in Minnesota Wild history, but
Kaprizov.
okay. So let's say somebody passed Kaprizov and you got an email that was like, let's all celebrate,
Mm-mm.
Joe
No.
Blow as the new franchise leader in points. Wouldn't you be kind of annoyed?
Yeah, I would say that's two different things.
Right. And that
Yeah.
is why I believe that when a team relocates and changes everything about it, it becomes a new club. I understand the business ramifications and why it's a relocation, not an expansion, and blah, 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 blah. But as a human being,
Yeah.
my attitude
New
is
owner, new city,
Yeah,
new arena,
get
new
out of
jerseys.
here. It's a new team.
Yes.
I don't,
Yeah.
It's like when people, and I realize it's sort of the opposite effect, but it's like when people say X or Twitter or whatever, and I'm like, no, it's just Twitter. Just call it Twitter. Like when people try and pretend that we're all not human beings and they try and be like, well, actually, I'm like, no. What are you backing this play
Well,
for?
let's see here, because with Twitter and X, obviously we all still call it Twitter. It did rebrand. It's a new owner.
Well, like I said, it's an opposite situation.
You're not retweeting, you're reposting.
I'm retweeting.
But you're not technically.
But
you're
the
reposting.
point. But so here's yes, it's opposite. However, the reason that I feel that it's the same thing, despite its opposite nature, at the end of the day, it's about how human beings engage with the thing that it is. And so nothing about Twitter changed other than somebody decided that they wanted to call it something different. Well, okay, fine. In the courtroom and in the quarterly reports and the sponsorship contracts, you can call it whatever you want. I'm calling it Twitter. And it's the same thing with the Utah Hockey Club. In the league offices, well, actually, because of the deal signed with Merrill, whatever. But with the Nordiques to the Avs, in the league offices, they can pretend that it's the same franchise all they want. And the record books and the quarterly, earnings reports and whatever can pretend it's the same. But as a human being, no, it isn't. It's a different team. I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, all right, Jack, we're here to look ahead at the week. I just wanted to talk about that because it's been driving me crazy for a week.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page. I believe
sweet.
It's completely different.
All right, good. I'm glad you agree. All right, there's 3 games coming up this week. The 29th of October against the Sharks, the 30th of October against the Golden Knights, and the 2nd of November against the Chicago Blackhawks. The Kings are currently 5-2-2. At the end of this week, I wouldn't be surprised if they're 7-3-2, which is an absurdly good record to start the season.
Yeah, no. Well, let's start with yes. They on paper, you're looking at a team that should win at least 2 games and have at least 4, if not 5 or 6 points at the end of the week. Of course, we're on the road to start on Tuesday, and we go back to back Tuesday, Wednesday, and both games are on national TV. So Tuesday is an ESPN game, Wednesday is a TNT game, and then back to FanDuel Sports Network for the weekend against Chicago.
Speaking of branding, good job on FanDuel Sports Network, not Bally.
Yes.
Excuse me, not some other random name that we won't use anymore.
Yeah. There we go. Speaking of branding. But yeah, it's such an interesting schedule to start the season because of course we're 5-2-2, but again we also have to look at the opponents that they've played, and again you've got you have the 2 worst teams in the Western Conference in San Jose and Chicago on the schedule this week, obviously sandwiched with Vegas, who is the leader of the Pacific Division currently right now. So it starts with San Jose. We can dig into some of those numbers, but obviously the Kings just saw them. It looked like it was going to be an absolute spanking in the first period when they went up 3-0, and obviously penalties and stupid plays and complacency kind of let San Jose back.
Jim Hiller says.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
You get up, you take your foot off the gas pedal, you think it's going to be a 9-0 game. All of a sudden it's 3-2 with a minute left in the game and you're on your heels. So, that's a great way to put it, Mr. Jim Hiller. So yeah, San Jose is 0-7-2 to start the year. They're minus 21 in the goal differential, which is a league worst. Yep. We're nine games in. They're already dashed 21.
Yeah.
Now they have a game on Monday, so they'll be on the second half of a back-to-back. But what is something to keep in mind in terms of just looking at numbers is the 1943-44 New York Rangers hold the record for the most losses to begin a season.
Uh-huh.
That is 15. So it could be
Okay.
11 by the end of Tuesday.
What was that, 80 years ago?
81? Yeah, 81 years ago.
Yeah, somewhere in that.
Yeah, 81 years ago, this has been standing. So not a number you want to be associated with. The Kings could very well play a part in helping the Sharks get closer to that number if they play the way they're supposed to. So the unfortunate thing is that Kings fans are, fortunate / unfortunate, is that Macklin Celebrini, obviously the number 1 overall draft pick from this past year, who seems to be, he's going to have a sensational career. We're going to have to wait a little bit longer to see if the Kings fans can see him against the Kings. He'll be out. He's obviously dealing with a lower body injury. Of course, he had a goal and assist in his first career game, which was the home opener and the season opener, but has not played since. The other interesting player that obviously there's a lot of excitement around when it comes to San Jose is Will Smith, who was 4th overall in the 2023 draft. He did not play against the Kings last week either. This coming week, it is yet to be seen if he will be playing. They've publicly talked about how he's going to be on quote unquote a pitch count rest because of the long season, and the 81 or 82 games is obviously a quick turnaround after playing only 30 or 40 games in college. So he didn't play against the Kings. He also did not play in another game, which was the second half of a back-to-back earlier this season. Obviously, this coming game will also be the second half of a back-to-back, but it is on home ice. So Will Smith, that's a tongue twister. Will Smith play against the Kings? It's yet to be seen. The other two players, obviously familiar faces and names to the Kings. Mikael Granlund leads the team in points with 10. He obviously had 2 goals, the only 2 goals that San Jose scored against the Kings last week when they fell 3-2. So he's got 10 points in 9 games. And then obviously the very familiar and beloved Tyler Toffoli tied with Granlund in the goal scoring department with 4, and he has 7 points in 9 games as well. So, another game that you would, assume that the Kings should be able to take care of business. But, that's why they play the game. So that's game 1 on Tuesday.
So there's one stat that I care about for this game, and it ties very closely into your what would you say, 1941?
1943 and 44.
1943, sorry. I stumbled across this on social media. Per Gino Hard, whatever account that is, the first team in NHL history to lose their first 9 games in back-to-back seasons.
Ooh.
Your San Jose Sharks. And I'm fascinated. Listen, sometimes I can be too honest, I'm told. And I'm assured that sometimes my face doesn't do a great job of lying for me. But I have been referring to the San Jose Sharks as like the worst team in the NHL without a question in a while.
Well,
and
that's a true statement.
Well, I'm sort of shocked that people give me pushback on it. Like they're the worst.
There's no way you can argue it.
Yeah, like and to be clear, it's by design. I don't think it's proof of their incompetence. I think it's proof of their strategy. Like now, did they want Macklin Celebrini to get hurt? No, and that's a huge, loss for them. But like, come on, they're bad.
Yeah.
And frankly, I was a little bit surprised at how bad I thought Anaheim was as well. We don't play them, but this week. But yeah. So then the next game is the next day against Vegas. We've seen San Jose. We've seen Vegas very recently. Vegas was one of those question mark teams heading into the season. Are they going to be good? Are they not? A lot of people seem to be sort of on the fence about would they be any good. I was not. I assume they'll be good until they're not good anymore.
Yeah, I don't see a way that you can ever count these guys out. And they run their their organization much different than a lot of people. Of course it's win now. You've got a great organization. You've got a good core, but draft picks aren't something they care about a lot because every single one
Yeah.
tends to be in a trade to acquire a guy in their prime. And it's not a strategy that I think a lot of us have ever seen. So it's interesting because it continues to work in terms of always making the playoffs and, being able to contend for a Stanley Cup. I can't do math anymore. Last math class I took was in high school, but they've been in 2 Stanley Cup finals in their existence, which is going back, I would say 7, 8 years now.
I think it's 7, yeah.
Yeah, solid percentage points in terms of getting there. So, Vegas leads the Pacific Division. They're 6-2-1, I believe 1 point ahead of the Kings through the same amount of games. And, a healthy Mark Stone leads the NHL in scoring. He's got a solid 17 points in 9 games with 4 goals and 13 assists, also a +8 to go with it. Jack Eichel not far behind, tied for second in the NHL in scoring with 15 points, 3 goals and 12 assists, also a +8, which is tied for 5th in the NHL in terms of plus-minus. Now, the interesting thing with Vegas is, and again, small sample size, we're 9 games into the season, 6-0 on home ice, and they average 5.6 goals a game. Kings obviously fell victim to that number, giving up 6 last week. And they average 2.66 goals against when they're at home. Flip it to the away, when they're on the road, they're 0-2-1. They give up 4 goals and they average 2.6 per game scoring. So, obviously you've got to like those numbers if you're a Kings fan, now that we're going to be playing them on home ice, on TNT, as I mentioned, branding. It'll be interesting to see because this team is obviously flying offensively. Now, having played 6 games at home and 3 on the road, and obviously with the offensive numbers that they're putting up so far, they've got 7 players averaging at least a point per game, which is by far the most in the NHL, which also includes getting William Karlsson back, aka Wild Bill, which is obviously one of the best nicknames in the sport. He returned this weekend against San Jose with a goal and an assist against, or as I mentioned, against the Sharks. So a team that is, high flying, offensive. They've got 2 solid goalies playing right now, obviously Adin Hill and Ilya Samsonov. The Kings will be interesting to see which one they saw. Obviously they saw Samsonov earlier this past week, and he handled the Kings quite easily. So that'll be the second half of a back-to-back. I believe we have like 13 back-to-backs this year. This is set number 2. So get used to it, Kings fans. You'll get a lot of hockey in.
I'm looking at the standings, and I realized this last night after the Utah game. We're recording this on October 27th. The 5-2-2 start is great. There's no, Jim Hiller said he's not going to overanalyze a win. I don't blame him. However, every year when we do our top 10 questions, I always ask what will happen in the Pacific Division, because there are a lot of things that happen outside of one team's control that will have an influence on its season. And looking at the Pacific Division, if we're looking at points percentage, Vegas is in first, Vancouver's in second, Calgary's in third, the Kings are in fourth. And it's not a bad points percentage. It's 667. If the Kings maintain that all the way through the season, I'll be thrilled. 667 is real good. But when you realize, there's 3 teams above you in points percentage, despite your hot start, and you're the only team in the top 5 with a negative goal differential. Now, it's only -1 today. But it is cause to say, well, we have to keep an eye on this. It's not as simple. Like, I'm not, as Jim Hiller said, I'm not going to overthink a 5-2-2 start, but it is something to keep an eye on. In the same vein as the San Jose Sharks, the Kings also play the Chicago Blackhawks. They are 2-6-1. They are also not terribly good. But again, it's by design. I don't feel like it's a criticism of them to say that. So on Kings Talk, somebody asked me, Jack, if the Kings had a shutdown D pair that they will use to try and focus on Bedard. I don't feel like they have done that in the past, but any thoughts on how to handle Bedard?
I mean, I would have to go back and watch the film on what we've done against Bedard. in the past, but I do feel like Doughty has been the guy that's kind of been the one that will match up if there is anyone.
Which is bad news for
So
next week.
that is bad news unless he miraculously
Yeah.
heals from this ankle injury in a span of 4 days.
Mhm.
That said, it'll be interesting because obviously Bedard is an undersized forward. He's 5'9" on a good day, I would say. So if you can add size, but the size also has to keep up with his speed, that's an interesting thing. So, you look at a guy like Joel Edmondson who's done that in his previous, tenures on different teams. He's obviously a guy that can handle defensive matchups and pairs. He's a bigger, meaner type of defenseman. Is that someone that they go with? Do they go back to Mikey Anderson, who obviously has familiarity of playing heavy minutes against top players in the NHL? So it'll be interesting to see, or if they just technically roll the lines and see what happens. That said, you talk about Chicago. They're going to be on the fourth game of a 5-game road trip when they enter Los Angeles. Currently 1-3-1 on the road. You talk about Bedard. He's the only player on the Blackhawks that's averaging a point per game, 3 goals, 6 assists in 9 games. Another player to watch out for is and actually I'll stop here for a second. The Blackhawks made quite a few moves this season in the offseason to try to get better, be more competitive, not be at the basement of either the Central Division or the Western Conference. Obviously, it hasn't worked yet. The one player that so far has worked in terms of the addition is Teuvo Teravainen, who returns to Chicago after a long stint in Carolina. Teravainen, now a line mate of Bedard's, has 3 goals and 4 assists in the 9 games, but is currently on a 4-game pointless streak. So hopefully it extends to 5 or 6 by the time the Kings get to them. But the other one is an interesting one because you look at Tyler Bertuzzi, who also signed a deal with the Blackhawks in the offseason. He had 40-something points per game or points last year with Toronto. Obviously, played meaningful minutes in the top 6 there, oftentimes on the top line with Matthews. He only has 2 goals, and that's it. No assists. So it's something that obviously the Kings hope to maintain and keep going in that direction. But it'll be interesting to see as the season goes on, whenever the Kings do see the Blackhawks next, what those 2 players are doing. Now, a name that Kings diehards are very familiar with is Peter Mrazek, who has just outstanding numbers against the Kings, yet a 3-3-1 record because he's just never been on a good team. 8 games, he's 3-3-1. He averages a 1.92 goals against the Kings and has a save percentage of .936. So yeah, I think in the last 3-4 years, as Mrazek has been in the Blackhawks uniform, we've come to get used to 2-1 games. Given the style of play that the Kings play and given the style of play that Peter Mrazek plays, if he is in fact suiting up against the Kings, hit that under, I would say. Now, the last one player just to note is Mikey Anderson's older brother, Joey Anderson, is on the Chicago Blackhawks. He's played in 5 games, had an assist in his last game, but has been out due to illness. I know he's back skating, but obviously has not cracked the lineup since the illness. So, yet to be seen if he will be in there, but obviously a little Anderson family reunion has happened a few times so far in their careers, and maybe we'll get another one at that on Saturday.
One final note about that game. It is a 1 p.m. game, and I know the team has a reputation amongst longtime fans as being terrible in 1 p.m. games.
Now, can I interrupt you there?
Yeah, please.
I feel like that's been debunked over the last 5 years.
That's where I'm going.
When I
agree
first
with you 100%.
I got here, I started with the Kings, and I know you're obviously a diehard. You've been living through the Kings since birth. But for me, I started interning in 2015, and I felt like all of my intern years, it was just a nightmare. And then since I've been here full-time 2020, we're perfectly fine. Any ceremonial games, we've been winning. Any day games, not a problem. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're saying exactly where I was going, which is, I feel like over the last 3 or 4 years, the 1 p.m. afternoon start time curse has dissipated. And I don't know why. I don't know. I don't know how long something has to not happen before the feeling of 1 p.m. game. Oh my God, it's going to be terrible. And then they win. Like the Utah game, everyone was like, 1 p.m. game against a new team that was no good last year, that's a loss. And it was like, well, we'll see. And then they didn't lose. But just throwing it out there, it is a 1 p.m. game. There's a lot of
there's a lot of not 7:30 and 7 o'clock starts on Saturdays this year, which for the fact that the Kings play like 25 Saturday games this year out of 28 possible Saturdays on the season, completely fine with that. Because
no complaints here.
Everyone deserves a nice
media room for a 1 p.m. start. So I'll take
French toast.
Yeah. Jack Jablonski, thank you for joining me as always, and we will talk to you soon.
Yep. See you next week.